Today on the official Marvel podcast, we'll hear from Emmy-nominated costume designer Daniel Selon about his work on Marvel Television's Agatha All Along.
Every costume needs to tell a story. So we were able to flesh out a lot of their lives and their backstory that maybe wasn't in the text or in the scenes for the show and embed it into the costumes.
And writer Delilah S. Dawson discusses her latest release, Thor and Loki, Epic Tales from Marvel Mythology.
But most people aren't aware of, there is a version of Thor that looks like a horse's denuded skull.
Plus, we'll dig into the comic book history of Loki, the god of mischief.
I'm Anthony Carboni.
I'm Sade Spence.
And this is the official Marvel podcast.
Spooky season, arguably the best season, is fast approaching, Anthony. And, it got me thinking, maybe I can take Halloween costume inspo from Agatha All Along. What do you think?
Oh, absolutely. There's so many great choices. Maybe like a Rio Vidal. That'd be pretty sweet.
I like
Get
that.
some friends together, be the Salem 7.
That's a great idea. And, you could be Billy Maximoff.
I think I am 20 years and a full beard away from ever being Billy Maximoff again, but I appreciate it. I'd give it an effort.
I was just trying to assemble a bit of a team.
Sure.
The point is, those costumes were all incredible and deserve to be celebrated. Fellow official Marvel podcast host Ray Lowe had the chance to speak with Emmy-nominated costume designer Daniel Selon about his work on Agatha All Along. Take a listen.
Daniel, I am so excited to talk with you for the show today because you've had an incredible year. And not only that, you've had an incredible career with Marvel projects before as an assistant costume designer. And now with Agatha All Along, you got your first full costume designer credit. And that work has been recognized with an Emmy nomination, which is huge. Congratulations, by the way.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, I'm truly just bursting at the seams. Every day I kind of pinch myself. But yeah, it's just been such a wild ride. This show keeps blooming flowers. It just is unending, the goodness that has come from this project. So I'm just trying to show up and embrace it and revel in it. And it's been glorious.
Well, so tell us a little bit about the story of getting into Agatha All Along, because obviously you had worked on WandaVision before this too. But what was the process of being hired on to the show, how you came to be a part of the creative process?
Yeah, so I was the assistant costume designer along with Joseph Feltis. We were assisting Maias Rubeo on WandaVision, and that was just such a really special time. I got to know Jack Schaefer and Mary Livanos, Jack Schaefer being the writer-creator of WandaVision, and then she wrote and created and directed some of the episodes of Agatha. And then Mary Livanos was also an EP on WandaVision and sort of carried through to Agatha. And so when they were prepping, they reached out and said, hey, will you pitch on this? And I met with them, pitched this whole thing, and so much of this show and so much of the story of Agatha is really Billy's story, the teen, and we follow him. And I said, as a young queer man, as a young gay man, I spent so much time around women. And my mom was an artist and a painter, and she was an educator, and she just had this literal covens of women and artists around all the time. And so I felt very much like I related to Billy in his journey of being raised by these witchy magic women. And I think that really clinched it for them because they called me an hour later and they were like, we want you.
So what was that pre-production process like with all these different creatives like yourself?
That period is very sacred for me. Me and my team, we sit down and we just go through magazines and old articles and reference books and, scour the internet and, just coming up with images and sort of finding little moments in history that maybe Agatha's life would have been affected by fashion or by what was going on in the world, current events, and kind of trying to throw some spaghetti at the wall and just see what sticks, because every costume needs to tell a story. So we were able to flesh out a lot of their lives and their backstory that maybe wasn't in the text or in the scenes for the show and embed it into the costumes. So yes, I'm a costume designer. I am deciding what goes on their body, but that's really just the medium. It's about character creation. And so to create characters, we have to create rules and at least guidelines or ideas about it's this, not that. And with Agatha, it was very much about these sort of strong graphic patterns. And so, you were able to put that into these complex prints and things. And also about the fit and the flair of it, and giving Catherine, who's a very embodied actress, something that will move around her. So it's really a little bit about creating costumes that will dance with the actor, and then understanding where we came from and where we're going. And for Agatha, it was a journey of vulnerabilities that she actually carries very close underneath her skin, even though she's got this very tenacious and sort of aggressive front. There's a whole little tender, ooey gooey, gushy, scared lady inside. And so it was about giving her this very strong silhouette with that coat that has the shoulders and the tailoring and everything. So it had a presentational quality to it. And then eventually, the coat gets destroyed because of the mud. And then she's left in just her slacks and her blouse, and she's rolled her sleeves up, and her hair starts up in this Gibson girl, style, and then slowly comes down. And so it's about this unraveling.
On that same hand, you have to work with these actors to make them feel comfortable in what they're wearing as well and help them key into that character. Are there any more of those moments you had with the actors and creating their costumes that just speak to how they key into their character more?
Totally. Yeah. Another one of those is actually Catherine and the coat, because originally we sort of designed it to be buttoned up, and sort of really closed off, that she was really protected. And I wanted it to be a little bit like a suit, really, so that she was sort of covered up. And she was like, well, could I roll the sleeves up? Catherine's always trying to kind of roll her sleeves up and get dirty. And she knew that she would have to in the show. And so we were like, yes, well, okay, all right. And I think that was where we decided, well, if we're flipping the cuffs up, we could design runes that would be revealed under that cuff, and so we did the left hand, which is usually considered where energy comes in and you're sort of absorbing, and that was consumption. So we created this artwork that was a consumption rune. And then on the right hand, where energy is typically seen as going out, or you're casting spells, or it's going outward, it was deception, because she's constantly deceiving people.
This is crazy.
It was so fun, but that's it's just playtime. And I like to approach it that way. It's you can come to the table with about 80 to 90% of the idea or the costume completed. And then you have to leave that wiggle room so that there's some magic that can happen between costumes and the actor and the creatives as well,
So let's touch on Aubrey Plaza's character real quick. Spoiler alert to everybody who has not watched Agatha all along yet. I don't know how you've waited this long. Get on it. She's also death incarnate. I'm telling you right now. So, okay, how do you approach, I guess, even the assignment of costume designing for a character called Death?
She was the biggest challenge for me, I would say, as a character, but also the most exciting. So I started thinking about her as the Green Witch. And we knew that she would show up to the road by crawling through Mrs. Hart's grave and sort of being conjured and arriving in this creepy way. So there needed to be a little bit of horror element. It needed to be a little bit spooky, but she also needed to be of nature. She needed to be one with Mother Nature and feel the textures of the mossy forest floor and the wet tree bark and, the lichen growing on the rocks and all of those things. Once we sort of decided on the palette of the colors and the textures, then we could look ahead to what she would look like as Death. And it was really designing sort of two concept art pieces side by side. And for me, it was about having a 1-to-1 ratio of if there's vines on the chest here on this portion, and they're green and they're growing and they look like they're alive when she's Green Witch, then we need to have something that is its counterpart when she's Death, so that there's a consistency of silhouette, and that we would then understand that those green, growing, alive plants died and calcified. And to push it even further, I brought in the concept of it being like rock, sort of like molten lava that then cools and becomes volcanic rock. It's like this endless cycle of birth and death, growth and decay.
You got to design the debut superhero look for Billy Maximoff in the series, which is such a special treat, I feel like, in the canon world of the MCU. So can you tell us a little bit about the evolution of that look?
Yeah, Wiccan really meant so much to me. And it was similar to Agatha, where this little boy was born in WandaVision, and I was there for it. I was literally behind the couch with Lizzie Olsen while she's like screaming, giving birth to this child. And, Myas and I were like helping swaddle these twins that we used on the day for all of that. And then to track it through, as they grow up. And then I even worked on Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness on the LA portion here, and, worked again with the kiddos. And to get this job and have the task of now Billy is a young man and getting to sort of, he gets to come out to the MCU. He gets to enter the world. Billy has entered the chat, and it was no small task. I, again, went back to the beautiful writing in the script. There was so much detail about his interests, and just his obsession with Agatha really fueled my concept of that we come to know him as the one who is manifesting the road and this whole experience for everyone, which means that he is a world builder. He's like Wanda Maximoff, he's creating realities. And so we needed to kind of work from early on in however we could support that with costume to understand that he is a world builder. And so I was like, well, all young artists, they try different kinds of things. You figure out, am I a potter? Am I a painter? Do I like to, collage? Is it murals? And so we're like, well, what if he, got super into knitting at one point? So he like knit himself this sweater, and, he like puts the runes into it. And then maybe he's like bored in class, so he's doodling on his jeans with a whiteout marker, and there's like sort of doodles on the side. And so we planted these seeds of all these things that then again, like a 1-to-1, we could see him wearing as teen and Billy Maximoff. And then when he becomes Wiccan, all of those elements in his costume, even down to the rip in his jeans, transform and they carry over. And also we didn't want to fully blast him out with like 100% as a superhero supersuit. We wanted it to be the teenage sort of first draft version that he would make for himself and give him somewhere to go in the MCU so that he can continue to level up as he understands his power. And it was such a joy. And I worked with Greg Hopwood, who's like a dear friend and a costume concept artist. And he has such passion for the character as well. So we were like two gay dads, like figuring out like what are our little
designing your little baby. Yeah, exactly.
The baby should wear out in the world for his debut.
The magic is just, it's so pervasive in the show. It really is. It is a character in the show, but it is everything you were watching. I don't know. It's my most rewatched show. So there's that. Don't tell anyone.
Oh, I'm so happy to hear that. I love it. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Daniel Selon, for joining us. It's so exciting to talk to you. You have just such a big brain. You have such a big vision.
Thank you so much, Ray. It was such a pleasure to talk to you. Yeah, and I encourage everybody to go watch the show again, and you'll see more details the second and third watchings. There's a lot of details in there, a lot of special little Easter eggs for you.
Let's talk about Thor and Loki. Not only are they beloved characters in Marvel Comics and the MCU, they're also kind of a big deal in Norse mythology.
Are they really?
Yes, Anthony.
Who knew? Well, I have exciting news for Marvel and Norse mythology lovers. The new hardcover book, Thor and Loki, Epic Tales from Marvel Mythology, is out now, and I got a chance to speak with the book's writer, Delilah S. Dawson. Take a listen. Delilah S. Dawson, it is lovely to hear your voice again. Welcome to the official Marvel podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. It's good to see/hear you too.
Yeah, I love Thor and Loki, Epic Tales from Marvel Mythology. This is such a wild idea and wonderful execution. Can you tell our audience a little bit about what it is?
We basically took the Marvel characters of Thor and Loki and introduced a scenario in which they have no choice but to regale the Avengers with the actual stories from Norse mythology in which they played their parts. But of course, they cannot tell them as unbiased observers. So there's going to be a little bit of snark as well as the kind of age-old sense of the bard trying to outdo all of the other storytellers at the table as they go through the Norse mythology. And then as they also retell a couple of actual Marvel stories that are apocryphal through Marvel, if perhaps not in the icy worlds of real life.
This was a fun thing to dive into. And what I love about it is it's Thor and Loki recounting the saga to a bunch of other Marvel characters who pop up in the middle of the story with questions that I think the average person would have. So who do we see kind of like hanging out and listening to the saga?
Well, the story begins at a surprise birthday party in Central Park for Peter Parker. So we've got Tony and Pepper and the Hulk is there. But yeah, so they're all there. And of course, Peter Parker shows up and it's just like why is my bouncy house crushed?
You're talking about some of these bonkers sort of bananas stories that come from Norse mythology. And I feel like there have been a couple projects in Hollywood and in TV lately that have pushed Norse mythology back into people's consciousness a little bit more. So for people who are maybe a little familiar, what kind of classic tales will they see in here?
Yes. So we've got, we have to tell, of course, of the beginning of the 9 realms and Thor and Loki's parentage and where they came from, which again, there's one point where he's like, you've never met your grandfather? And he's like, I think I did once, but he was like in a disguise. So who could even know?
Yeah.
Oh, it's so much fun. Yes, we have the beginnings. We have the creation of the various gods, the Vanir and the Asgardians, how Odin lost his eye, the meat of poetry. I mean, the Walls of Asgard and the birth of a very special horse is always going to be one of my favorites. But yeah, the Avengers are surprised to learn that Thor and Loki are both fathers. And that they have both been married. And there is some interesting overlap from the Marvel to the Norse worlds where, we have characters like Sif, who in the Norse mythology is Thor's wife. And then now she is a different kind of warrior. So Thor's explaining like, yeah, man, this was like 100,000 years ago when I was a god. So like the rules were different.
I love that. And so then when you are trying to then pick from the saga and then pick from the biggest or most important Marvel stories, how do you choose like a Marvel story that sits alongside the Norse saga and you can go, I can put this in here. This goes up in the pantheon.
You want a story that is going to make people excited to hear it, and it is going to have that feel of mythology, like Thor, Frog of Thunder, which I think is going to be a big favorite of everyone, because if you haven't heard of Frog of Thunder, Thor was a frog for a while, and he was still a hero. And we also went with Loki for president, and then there's like a lot about Malekith, because as the Norse myths go on, the whole point we're telling them is because we have to explain Ragnarok, which is how Malekith comes in. Can we just mention that this is the most beautiful book that has ever existed? It's gorgeous.
Yeah, Gabriel Hernandez Walta illustrating this book. Every time I got to a new illustration, it was just a joy. Can you tell us what it was like collaborating with him on this?
I actually didn't. In the way of many IP works, the writer and the artist work independently. So when things showed up, it was a big surprise for me. But it was also an amazing surprise. Like, the style is so beautiful.
It's gorgeous. Gabriel's style is a beautiful mix between comic and something that you would expect to see in like a mid-century Tolkien illustrated edition. And I think it really just brings the whole thing together really beautifully.
It does. So we have full page, full color, and then we have just some kind of, I'm looking at one right now that's got Loki's 3 children, and it's just iconic. The lines are so gorgeous.
Yeah, they really are. You worked with artists before. You've worked on a lot of comic books as well as working on novels. How does your creative process differ writing a comic book versus writing prose?
Well, with prose, it's basically me and the computer until I have a finished draft that I would send on to my editor. So I write a book in about 2 months. So it's like 2 months of peace and quiet, and then it goes out, and then revisions come back, and I go through the stages of grief, and then I make the revisions and send them back, and then we have copy edits and send them back. But with the comic, there's something coming in almost every day. It's almost like an IV drip of stuff where, I'll send in my script, and then I'll get the wireframes for 1 or 2 pages, or we'll get the character development, and we'll talk about those. So I'm almost constantly involved in all of the various approvals for comics, to the point where when I see the finished comic, I've kind of been watching it all along, because I have to check the wireframes, the color, colors and the words as well, the letters. So it's a delight to see the finished project the artists do the heavy lifting, like they do the hard job, and seeing how they interpret things is absolutely glorious. Like the artists are just genius.
Yeah. So you were saying that you're big into mythology growing up. Were you somebody who was pretty well versed in the Norse stuff going into this, or did you have to kind of go back and do some research and kind of brush up?
In the way of a neurodivergent child in 5th grade, I hyperfixated on mythology for quite some time. So it all felt very familiar, almost like a story that you've heard several times before. But, before I wrote this book, if you put a gun to my head and said, what is the tale of Otter's ransom? I would be like, I'm pretty sure Loki killed an otter and then bad things happened. But I was on a road trip coming back as I would turned in my final draft, and I was on a road trip with my family, and my husband was like, I need you to talk to keep me awake while I drive. And I was like, well, get ready to hear everything you've ever wanted to know about Norse mythology, because I'm about to recite it for you.
That's amazing.
People being born out of armpits.
What was the more interesting puzzle for you, to write a Norse myth in a Marvel style or to write a Marvel story in a Norse myth style?
I would say the hardest part was integrating the Marvel stories, because we used the story from the first Avengers is decades old, and the word usage is very different. So we kind of had to put the older stories into the same kind of voice that we would use today that would work with the book. And then we had Kid Loki is much more recent. Loki for President is much more recent. Frog of Thunder is pretty old too. So integrating the older stories and tones and ways of speaking into the rest of the book was an interesting challenge.
You've written books for a lot of franchises, Star Wars as well. And what is something when you're working on a Marvel story that makes it a Marvel story?
It's got to be fun and kind of quick-witted, I think. Comic books are inherently fun, and they have little jokes and levity, while also really big problems. Most of the things that we're facing isn't, they got my order wrong at the drive-thru. It's Ragnarok. The world is ending. The aliens are here. The thing is in a rift. The world is breaking apart. We've lost half of the population. They deal with very big problems. So you have to kind of balance that darkness and overhanging fear of what they're fighting with the personalities of the characters and what draws us to them and the way that they interact with each other as friends and colleagues, and just have fun with it.
Yeah. And you really do feel that in this book. And it is all it's funny and it's very true to the characters. Is there a part, something from the collection, a story, a character, a bit that you are most excited for readers to discover?
Frog of Thunder holds a special place in my heart. Like, it's just so fun. And also the use of Beta Ray Bill, because most of us have seen him on like a shirt at Comic-Con or a lunchbox or something, but most people aren't aware of there is a version of Thor that looks like a horse's denuded skull who is worthy of the hammer and has saved our world.
The book is Thor and Loki, Epic Tales from Marvel Mythology. Delilah Dawson, thank you so much for joining us. It was great to see you.
You too. Thanks so much for having me.
That Loki, he's really gotten into some crazy situations over the years. It's honestly overwhelming to recap all of his comic book adventures.
Oh, I know, Anthony, but you know what? Don't worry about it. You don't have to, because today we get to sit in on a very unique history lesson all about the God of Mischief. So get ready, because we're off to Asgard.
Be seated, children. It is time for your next history lesson. And let me begin with a compliment. The other elders and I are in agreement that, with a few notable exceptions, yours has been one of the most studious and respectful classes to pass through this academy in ages. The future of Asgard is in good hands. Now, today, we will be discussing one of the most vile and despicable of Asgard's residents, the infamous trickster Loki. Let us first examine the incidents of this foul villain's birth, in which...
Excuse me, Elder Alvir?
Yes, Ingrid.
Aren't you being a little harsh, calling Loki vile and foul and a villain and such?
Am I being harsh to Loki, the god of lies? I think not. Now, where were we? His birth, yes. Did you know that Loki is not even truly Asgardian? It's true. He was born the natural son of Laufey and Farbauti, king and queen of the frost giants of Jotunheim. And even they did not want him. They were embarrassed and ashamed to call such a ludicrously tiny frost giant their son.
But doesn't that make you feel bad for him?
For the god of evil. I scoff at your question, child, and please refrain from calling out in class. Now, after All-Father Odin slew Laufey in battle, he saw fit to take the infant Loki back to Asgard, where he and All-Mother Frigga would raise him as their own, and as brother to their true son, Thor.
But All-Father Odin could see everything, right? If Loki was so bad, why'd Odin make him family?
The All-Father works in mysterious ways. It's not for us to question. It's especially not for you to question, Ingrid. And if you don't start properly raising your hand, I'll send you to do kitchen duty with Volstagg.
Sorry.
I'm sure that you are. Beginning at a very young age, Loki grew jealous of his brother, Thor.
Or did you have to make the air quotes?
Yes, Odin loved Thor far more than his false son, as did the people of Asgard, and the boy's insidious envy grew in him like a sickness. It bred in him the desire, nay, need to torment others with his foul trickery. No one was safe from Loki's sinister pranks.
You know, calling them pranks doesn't make them sound all that bad.
But these were not mere pranks of the kind you and your ilk enjoy playing upon the elders. These were pranks from the god of mischief.
What were they? Can you, describe one?
He once cut off the hair of Lady Sif while she slept.
Okay. I mean, that's not cool, but it doesn't sound quite God of Evil worthy.
Well, that's just one example. The misdeeds of Loki are many. Why, he even tried to sabotage the creation of Thor's mighty hammer, Mjolnir. When Odin bade the dwarves create a special weapon for Thor, crafted from pure Uru metal, Loki interfered with the process, and as a result, Mjolnir will forever have a handle that is slightly too short.
Wow, that is seriously underwhelming.
He's done worse. He once turned himself into a snake to scare Thor.
That one at least sounds pretty cool.
He turned Thor into a frog.
Well, that's just hilarious.
Listen to me, young lady. Loki is the bane of Asgard's existence. To laugh him off as some kind of joke is an offense to the entire realm. Yes, he is the god of mischief and lies, but his capacity for evil goes far beyond the minor pranks we've mentioned thus far. For Odin's sake, he honed his mystical talents under the tutelage of the black magic sorcerer Eldred. He's played traitor to Asgardian throne on multiple occasions. When the forces of the fire giant Surtur invaded Asgard, for instance, Loki signed a non-aggression pact with them.
But didn't Loki ultimately betray Surtur in the war and fight in defense of Asgard?
At the end, sure, but believe me, Asgard's enemies know full well that Loki has no loyalty to us. When the gods of the Egyptian pantheon abducted All-Father Odin and planned to take control of all of Asgard, they went straight to Loki for help in getting past our defenses.
Yeah, but Loki turned them down and helped Thor rescue Odin instead, didn't he?
By the roots of Yggdrasil! An older version of Loki came back in time and literally usurped the throne.
And the current Loki overthrew him, saving all of Asgard.
Fine! Ragnarok! Let's see you find a way to Loki-wash Ragnarok. The prophecies tell us that Loki will begin Ragnarok, the end of Asgard, by bringing about the death of Balder the Brave. Loki will kill Balder, whom everyone loves, by the way, and that act will set into motion the war that will ultimately end the gods of Asgard. It is fated. There is no way around it. Therefore, it is utterly pointless to attempt to defend or look for any kind of nuance in the acts of the god of lies.
Technically, Loki gave up that title and became the god of stories.
How Do you know these things? Where are you even getting this information?
From my, outside tutor.
Outside? Who in Asgard would dare attempt to instruct my students in the history of the realm? Who would fill their heads with such... What is all this, Cloudy? Where is Ingrid? I was in the middle of reprimanding her. Did she just vanish in a puff of smoke? Well, that's, class dismissed.
On this day in 2014, Spider-Gwen debuted in Edge of Spider-Verse issue number 2. The comic introduces viewers to a reality where Gwen Stacy is the one bitten by a radioactive spider, not Peter Parker. At the start of our story, Gwen appears to lead a normal life as a drummer rehearsing with her band, the Mary Janes. But we quickly discover that Gwen is leading a double life as Spider-Woman. She's driven by a tragic memory of her universe's Peter Parker. In an attempt to give himself special abilities to be more like Gwen, Peter transformed himself into an enormous lizard-like monster. And following an agonizing battle, Peter dies in Gwen's arms, leaving her heartbroken and unjustly blamed for his death. Meanwhile, Gwen's police captain father, George Stacy, doesn't love that his daughter is in a band and wants her to focus on college. However, George has bigger problems. The city's organized crime figures are gunning for Captain Stacy, but Spider-Woman puts a stop to the assault. After preventing the attack, Gwen reveals her superhero identity to her dad to stop him from arresting her for the murder of Peter Parker. In shock, he lets her go, and she swings off into the night and into comic book history. Since her debut, Spider-Gwen has appeared on screens large and small and in multiple comic series which bear her names. Yes, names. Because whether you know her as Spider-Gwen, Spider-Woman, or Ghost Spider, she is the hero that readers have come to know as the one who never gives up, no matter the obstacle. That's it for this episode. If you haven't already, make sure to leave us a review wherever you're listening. It helps other Marvel fans find the show.
Yes, and make sure you're subscribed so you never miss an episode.
This episode was hosted by Sade Spence and myself, Anthony Carboni.
Our producers are Jasmine Estrada and Anita Flores, with additional writing from Christopher Healy and performances by Michael Spadaccini and Torrin Higgins.
With help from Senior Manager of Audio Production and Development, Brad Barton, and Production Manager, Emily Godfrey.
Mixed by Zachary Goldberg.
Theme music by Ida Akbal.
Executive producers are Larissa Rosen and Jesse Berger.
Thanks for listening. We'll see you next week.